Yeah, folks, the God is there, and He's waiting for you to call to Him. You know, it's like the whole thing. You know, your students come to you. You don't really, go to your students. Yeah. They find you, and you find God, and He's there to open the door. And I believe that that's what Christ and the Holy Spirit's job was to do, was to pull us out of this what I believe we're living in, the Kali Yuga. It's a very dark time, and where these entities have sway, and Christ was sent for that purpose. People say, well, it was 2,000 years ago. That's nothing. And when you look at the time period that we're living in of the Kali Yuga, it's 432,000 years. We've been given a reprieve of 10,000 years where we still have spirituality and the power to combat these things. Once that's over, then it's just darkness for a long time until Christ returns. And then, that's according to the Hindu belief. But it's really weird that Christ and Krishna, they're very similar names, but if you call out to Christ or God, like Jason did, there's a lot of I put a lot of stock in that, because there's a lot of stories, multiple times where people have told me they've been attacked by some sort of flying entity, a Dogman, even a Bigfoot. I've had people tell me
or aliens.
Aliens, yes, the alien abduction, and the speaking of Christ's name, it stops it.
I didn't speak Christ,
but you said God
in my head.
But you acknowledge the higher power, the source, which is Christ's Father. And so that's very telling, because I've heard it both ways. When someone cries out to God or Christ, and they are delivered. I've done that many times because I've been pulled out of my body, and what you were saying, Jason, about how, and folks, they're going to think this is weird if you're not initiated, but most of my fans are, as Bane said, initiated.
Right.
Or
like the Jimi Hendrix said, "Have you ever been experienced?"
If you've had it, you know it. I fell asleep. I got to a job site that had some weird activity. I talked about it on my show at one point. A guy that I'd known for years, I'd known since I was 17, he saw this cat-like looking entity, and then I saw the same thing. It looked like a shadow, and then it came up off the ground, and there was a lady that used to live in that neighborhood, and she would walk around at night, not just wandering around. She would go for a little walk with her. She had like this big, like shillelagh-looking stick, and she would always wave at me, and she's an African-American lady, and she'd stop and she'd talk to me, and she was very, very polite, and she was real big on the earth and, in touch with that, that kind of stuff. And she was a very nice lady, but she told me there was something there. And she said, one of these days, it's going to really harass you if you give it, the opportunity. I said, okay, thanks for the warning. Well, I ended up seeing something. Long story short, I fell asleep, and something began to shake the truck, violently shake the truck. So when I woke up, I started, oh my gosh, the truck is shaking. Something's moving the truck, and I'm freaking out, and I'm reaching to try to turn the key. My hand keeps going through it, and I'm going like, what in the heck is going on? And I reach for my steering wheel, and my hand goes through the steering wheel. I was out of my body. And then I knew immediately, okay, I'm out of my body. I've been through this before. This thing yanked me out of my body, because what they do. And so then I kind of had to, it's weird. You have to kind of go back to sleep. I don't know how to describe it. You kind of fall back into your body, or you go back to sleep, and you have to kind of, sometimes it's very rare that's happened, maybe twice, where I've had to actually focus on going back. A lot of times you just jerk back into it. But I woke up for real, and the truck was kind of moving, but not violently like it was before. And I sat up, and I started the truck. And what got me was I had just drank one of those double shot espresso drinks. I was wide awake. I'd eaten lunch, and it wasn't a heavy lunch. So there's no reason. I had plenty of sleep. There was no reason for me to be that tired, because it drains you like a battery. And then you end up going to sleep. And seeing that happen to me at another one of my sites, which wasn't too far from a few weeks before right before I got sick with the COVID. I had one of my guards call frantically And I don't know if you knew this, Jason, but she was on my live stream, and she came on the show. Her name was Lily.
Yeah.
And she
I heard some of this.
And she said that she saw this weird light, and then so we started talking about that area. Well, there's a place that was no longer called that; it was called something else back when it was being built, and it was my friend Snake that was building it, and they call him that because he was a rattlesnake sacking champion.
I hate snakes.
Yeah, and he's amazing. He I saw him kiss a cobra on top of the head. Yeah, at the American Legion Hall in Taylor.
No.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. My nephew took a video of it. I don't know if he still got it, but I'd like to post that if he's got it. But so Snake was building a job. I played baseball with his son, knew him for years. So he gave me a doing security for him when I was working for this other company. And when I told him that I was there, he said, "Yeah, well, I'll request you." So I went to work for him, and I ended up working for him for a few months at that job until it ended. And a lot of weird things happened there, but one of the most prominent things was that my watches would go dead. I had a Game Boy, the Advance, those little ones, going dead. I had a freaking truck batteries go dead because these things were draining the batteries and they were draining me.
Yeah,
and then it began. I had two pictures of orbs, and then one of the pictures there were these two goblin-looking faces looking in at me in my truck, which just freaked me out. But it ended up in an email account because. That no longer exists, and so I lost it because I had a different phone, and you change phones, and back then it wasn't like it is now where everything goes up to the cloud and all that. It was just kind of like but yeah, I had a lot of weird stuff happen there. So whenever this guard, when she began to tell me about these blue orbs these things were jumping out of, it didn't shock me. I mean, I wasn't even like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, because it had happened to me. And then it happened to Clark, who was one of my guards. It was actually my brother's former brother-in-law, he's Zane's uncle on the other side. And he's 6'5" Marine, big tough guy. He's not scared of nothing. And he was like, yeah, I've seen these orbs, like they look like balls of light. I saw the same thing, and it's all in that same area. And that can't be a coincidence. I think that's how these things travel,
Yeah.
And so there's all this stuff going on. The batteries being drained, but then I would fall asleep every night at like 3:00, and I'm not a person that does that on post. And so I kept falling. So then I'd fight to stay awake. So then I'd go and walk. And at one point, I felt like I was half asleep, and I fell into the pool. And it was just weird. Yeah, it was a lot of crazy stuff. I really hated that site. And every time any of my friends would drop by to drop me off food or whatever, they'd see stuff. They'd see weird stuff. And a big thing they saw, my friend Pete, when he was there, and he listens to the show, my friend Arash, my friend Bones, all three of them still good friends of mine to this day, they all saw shadows. And my friend Roger, who's now passed on, but at the time he was a devout atheist, he saw shadows. And he was real big on everything is, in your mind, everything's physical, there's no spiritual whatever. He's a smart guy, but he was very devoid of the spirit, and he wasn't, when he died, he wasn't that way. But he saw shadows too. And so I told him, I said, dude, every buddy that works at this job site, they won't stay there at night. And so then 2 or 3 miles down the road, now we still have a bunch of weird stuff going on at this other site. And I had a guard calling me frantic. Hey, I got to leave. There's this weird entity that came out of this ball of light. I believe the ball lights were orange, and the entities that jumped out of them were blue. That's what she said.
She saw entities that would like blue, like human figure-like entities jump out.
Yep. And when I talked to Nick Redfern,
I have a whole fascination with orbs.
That. Oh, the orbs. Yeah. I mean, I talked to Nick Redfern, and I asked him because he's done a lot of work with the UFOs and all that. And then another friend of mine who's Albert Rosales, about these blue entities. Whitley Strieber is the one that they referred to, like his book. Where communion, where they, and so there is a very strong thread there. I mean, you're going like, I had a female that I worked with at a job, was a startup company. And I was the head of security, and it was a very well-paying job. You're talking $16 an hour back in 2000. Okay, that's pretty good. That was pretty good money back then. Yeah, 21 years ago. And Scorpion worked under me, So he's over there one day and he's talking to the head of security for the building, and he tells her, she was working for one of the smaller companies, that was in the building. And so he tells her that I had a werewolf encounter when I was 15. And when he told, I was in absolute shock and horror that he did that. I said, "Are you kidding me? These people are going to think that I am out of my freaking mind. They're going to probably give me a psych eval, and then they're probably going to tell me, you know what, you need to, go ahead and leave." We went ahead of security that's seeing werewolves. It wasn't like Dogman was just real popular back then or anything. I didn't even know what a Dogman was. I always just thought it was some sort of werewolf looking creature. And he tells her that. Well, then one day, she's sitting there playing solitaire. And I went up to her and I was like, "Hey, what's up? You want some coffee?" I'm trying to butter her up, because I don't want her to go and tell on me that I'm crazy. And so she was very astute, she was really smart. She's probably about 10, 15 years older than me and Scorpion. And she said, she's like, "Yeah, your buddy told me about your story." And I'm like, "Oh, really? What was that?" I acted all, kind of like I was just like, "Huh?" And so she was like, "Yeah, the story about the wolf-looking creature." She goes, those are aliens. Because, of course, a lot of times when somebody sees ghosts, then everything's a ghost. If they see aliens, everything's alien. Whatever they've seen, that becomes their wheelhouse. And then and we all do that. We're guilty of that. But she tried to tell me there was an alien. And I was like, I don't think that's what it was. But I let her talk. And I said, "Well, how?" I said, "How do you know this?" She says, "Well, I've been abducted since I was 11 years old." At that time, I think she was in her mid-40s. And she was like, "I've been abducted since I was 11 years old." So for 2 months, she was captivating me and Scorpion and this other guard that was working there with these stories of her abductions. And I took my journal up there. I didn't have a little recorder or anything. But I took my journal and started writing all these notes down of what she was telling me. And that was very common. And she had, at one point, she had a shadow entity in her room. Okay, get this. It literally evolved right in front of her into a gray alien being.
I haven't got to the rest of the part of my story we'll get to, and there's an alien connection.
Yeah, see, and that was what was weird. And when she said that, I remember writing that down in particular and thinking, that's crazy. And the ball of light, she said that at one point they came through the wall, straight through the wall, like the wall didn't even exist, and they were in like an orb. They were in orbs, like they came down through the orbs and kind of jumped out. I had a guy come on my show, name was Richard, and he talked about when he was working up in Washington and these two dogmen jumping out of an orb. It's a very common theme, these things.
I've heard that. And Bigfoot too.
And they pop out of them, and I'm not like some people. They think Bigfoot's out there just jumping up and in and out of portals and orbs and everything else. But
I know.
But yeah, because there's some people that just take it too far. But it has happened. People do see them and they do travel. Aliens, Bigfoot, Dogman. I mean, you name it. These winged humanoids, Mothman. People have seen them, doing this, and shadow people. And I've also done cases, and I told you this, Jason, the other day, where the little boy, he was talking to a Dogman creature, and there was a shadow person with a hat, like the Hat Man, in their house. It was going on at the same time, and then the husband was in complete denial, which a lot of times they are. I don't know what that is about men just being like, I didn't see nothing. It just looked like a shadow. And I'm like, that was a shadow that looked like a man. And when he got out of the shower and it was there in the bathroom, and total denial about it. Oh, I don't know. I just kind of looked. It must have been a trick of the light. And I'm like, okay.
I said, it's Jack Nicholson in The Shining. And he's like, I didn't see anything after the naked lady in the shower attacks him. And he goes back to Wendy and is like, I didn't see anything. Nothing there.
And she's like, I'm losing my mind. And he's like, I'm trying to write my book or whatever. He was, getting
bash your brains in.
He's getting so mad.
Bash your brains in, Wendy.
Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, they're in complete and utter denial. But I think some people kind of fall under this spell, so to speak, of these entities because they'll isolate someone.
Exactly.
And I know the haunting in Connecticut, the real story, John Zaffis. And I actually tried to get him on the show, but he told me that he wasn't doing podcasts. Yeah, he said he wasn't doing it.
Yep.
But Zaffis went through a horrific incident where, he went down the stairs and this thing blew. So the whole story. And he himself, they all said that it was trying to isolate people so it could attack you. It's kind of separate you, like lions and hyenas and wolves when they hunt in packs. Killer whales do the same thing. They isolate one and they go for that.
What do they do? They go after what one do they isolate? They always isolate the one that's weaker or slower.
Mm-hmm.
They look for the one that might be sick, or they look for the easy prey.
Injured, yeah.
And
I believe that your vulnerability completely depends on your level of power and your spirit. And I believe, and in my opinion, I know Jason, you may differ from this. A lot of people don't agree, but I believe that it comes from a higher power, and I believe that it comes from the source, the creator. And if you're in touch with that, you're in tune with that. That is your power. That is your shield. That is your armor and your sword. And I believe that if you don't have that, then you're what they call a target. And not just for these entities, but for people who practice magic, curses, all this other stuff. I've had them tell me point blank to my face, that those are targets. Those people who aren't, that don't. So it's very simple. It's not a Chinese arithmetic. You're not trying to, solve the you're just basic the mystery of the universe. It's not like you're trying to solve that. It's just basically protection. Jason, you had something that came out. It appeared, and it saw you. And maybe you're in a vulnerable place in your life, and it parasitized you, and then your friend.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you don't want to do in any situation is challenge it.
No.
Or invite it to come after you is what I exactly did. Not openly I didn't even have to speak it out loud. It was all in my mind. I said it, and that was enough, I think. Now, when I told you about the older man that stepped out, for a long time I felt, well, maybe because that psychic experience my mom had when she told about my half sister and all that, me talking to her. She also told her that my great grandfather Mason, last name Mason, Harvey was his name, was our guardian, would watch over us. So I assumed that maybe that was Harvey. I didn't really know him. He died right before I was born. But later on, I got a picture. I think I even I thought it was Harvey in Mike Ricksucker's book. But it wasn't long ago I actually saw a picture my mom posted of her great-grandfather Bach. And I'm like, that's who I saw. It was him. My great-grandfather I never met. My grandmother, who I was really close to's father, saved me. And God. I think God sent him there to save me and warn me, not to watch what you do. And I feel like that event blocked this thing from getting to me. Mostly, I would think, at least the shadow person. I'll get to the alien connection here. Is something I'm still trying to figure out. But it wasn't the last time I had an encounter with this shadow person. I felt it stayed mostly out of my life, but there's a couple instances I've had with shadow people since. One time, and this is a really weird story, me and my wife were driving down this road. It's called Johnson Road. And there's a bar there. I'm trying to remember the name of the bar. There's a curve. The road curves, and there's a bar there. And you can see always the lights of the bar are always bright in the darkness of the night. And there's all these houses that are dark usually at that time of night. And the only thing lighting up was the bar. But we're coming right around the curve, can see the bar up ahead. And in the light from the bar down the road, my wife's driving. I'm in the passenger seat. And this was before we were married, actually. And I married her because she was totally into the weird, and I could tell her everything.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. I love my wife. 18 years married. We both see this. We see this figure, dark, tall, shadow figure down the road, lean out and look at us as we're driving towards it. For just a few seconds, we see it, and then this is where things get really messed up. It's like somebody turned the lights off in the world. Really, it's like somebody blinded us. It was so quick. It was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds maybe of total blackness. My wife screams because she's experienced this too. She can't see. She's driving right at that bend. Right as she turned, we go blind. Both of us. It was so pitch black. I couldn't see my hands. I couldn't see anything. And, if somebody shuts off the lights suddenly on you and it's completely black, you see the purple because that's the chemical in your eye. I was seeing the purple. That's how blind I was. It was total black, and I was starting to see purple for those few seconds. Like somebody just shut the lights out on us, and all I could hear was my wife scream. And then it was gone. We could see, and she was like, "What the bleep was that?" So there was that instance. What we found out, what we didn't think about, is right at that curve, more than a number of people have died at that curve. Car wrecks. Right at that curve. Now it makes you wonder how many of them went blind in that amount of a second. Now, is that the same shadow entity I experienced then? I don't know. And it's also
the chicken and the egg thing, like that there'll be a haunting where, okay, let's take the Amityville. What was the guy's name? He killed. What was the name?
He just recently passed, and I actually know somebody that knew him and interviewed him. I was really close to him, and he actually told her he watched my show. Jackie Barrett's a medium who's interviewed him. Mm-hmm. He just recently died, and I can't think of his name at the moment.
Defoe. What was his name?
Robbie Defoe.
Yeah, and so. The guy that had, I forgot his name. It had an Italian name, I think, the one that actually killed his family. What was his name?
Robbie Defoe killed his family.
Was it Defoe that killed his family? I thought he was the one that
he killed his brothers and sisters and his parents. He shot them all in the middle of the night while they were all found laying in their bed. And everybody wonders, how could he shoot everybody except for I think his one sister was found in a closet, shot dead.
Yeah. But what was it? The people that moved in, they were what were their names?
Oh God, this is a long time since I talked
so
about
hard. It's so hard to remember that. But the point is that what came first? Was it a demonic entity or something like that was convincing him, or did he do that horrific thing and then it attracted that negative energy? Because that's something that has happened multiple times, over the years.
The history of that with Robbie Defoe, he was a heavy drug user.
Yeah.
Heavy. Heroin, and his family was tied up in the drug trade. He tried to he denied killing his family for a long time, feeling like somebody his father was involved with killed all of them, but really he did it. And he came to accept that. You should see my interviews with Jackie Barrett on this subject.
Wow.
She swears to God she communicated him the first time she ever got a show. She's like, she taught him how to astrally project because he couldn't leave prison. Mm-hmm. And that they would correspond quite often. And the night before my show, he goes, "I see you're going to be on a show," and she's like, "I think he's watching right now." That kind of gave me creeps.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But like I said, he was doing heavy amount of drugs. There's a willing victim if there's something there. What I wanted to say, though, is that was one about being weak. The only other time I saw maybe what I felt was the shadow person, I felt that same presence again when I actually felt the presence, as me and my wife's first apartment was extremely haunted. It seemed like all different kinds of spirits would be walking in and out of that place. And we were right across from St. Anthony's Hospital, which just recently got tore down. I was born there. My kids were born there, and my mom worked there for many years. And I walked the halls of that place, but I always felt all kinds of presences in that hospital. And one night we even saw faces on the corner wall that faced that hospital. Me and my wife both saw these just barely mist of glowing light coming through our walls, and we could see faces coming out. So this place was haunted. Okay. But there was one room we would just not touch in this apartment. It was an upstairs apartment, and there's a guy that lived below. And we'd never really wanted to do anything in this room. None of us talked about it. We talked about the haunted stuff going on, but both of us never would talk about that room. We would just not go in there. One night I had the flu. Really bad. I was really sick. So maybe this was a fever. Maybe this was a feverish dream I had, but I was awake. I know I was awake. I was sitting in the living room. My wife worked late nights. I was by myself, and I was feeling so miserable. And then I get that feeling. I'm like, I know this feeling. It's the feeling that I had with the shadow person. And I'm like, I start speaking out loud. Wherever you are, you're not welcome here. You cannot affect me anymore. I'm not afraid of you. Get out. I speak it out loud. In the name of God, get out of my house. And I turn. I'm in the living room, in that room that we wouldn't go in. There was a doorway there. Didn't have a door. We'd never want to go in there. I turn and look into that room because I hear some movement in there, like something rattling a bag. We didn't have any pets or anything at that time. We ended up getting a pet, actually, not long after that, because I think none of us wanted to be alone in that apartment.
Yeah.
and I see the black shadow figure in that room. And I just am frozen again. And I just look at it. I can't move, but I can talk. And I'm like, you will not affect me. You will get out of my house. You will leave now. And I'm like, just keep repeating that. And I see that black shadow at the top where its head would be start to pull in like this reddish, slight reddish hue. And then form into a face. And that face is a face I saw during a meditation once, candle meditation. I saw the same face in the candle once too. It's this ghoulish face. It reminds me like almost like a little bit of like a Dogman. You know, like the kind of descriptions of a face, but it's all hued by red, but I could see it. And once I saw the face, I'm like, get out. You are not welcome. Get out of my house. And I finally break through I'm not frozen anymore. And I stand up and I walk up to that doorway and I'm like, we're going. Like, I am not going to back down. You are out of here. And this thing, whoosh, gone. And I was so sick. I was so miserable. I was so weak after that. But I think the only reason they tried to come after me because I was, I had the flu so bad. I've been sicker since then. I've had the swine flu, for God's sake. I haven't had COVID, knock on wood. Swine flu, I did hallucinate from a fever, but I knew it was hallucinations from a fever. It was so bad. But this, I don't think I had that bad of a fever. I was just miserable sick. And I'm a baby. I'm a guy. So when I get sick, I'm just a big baby. I was probably sick at that point for almost a week. So I was pretty worn out and miserable. And I think my only theory is this thing had one could get at me because I was in a house that had no protection. It was anything was coming in and out of that house. It was like just an open doorway for some reason to all kinds of spirits. So I think it found an open doorway to get to me and get to me while I was weak. But yeah. I still feel like I carry whatever happened that night. It was banished from me. I carry that with me, that this thing can't get too close for me. And I also accepted then that I have control, not this. It does not have control over me. I have the control. And I've stuck with that. Doesn't mean I'm bravado or being brave. I just realize how these things operate. They only operate if you give it fear, if you give into the fear.
Yeah. They need that energy.
Yeah, they need that energy. So that's why I've always been fascinated by, I started to, I've got into studying, I'm not a demonologist or anything like that, but I got studying into the demonology. I've studied all the other different kinds of folklore of people's experience with different entities, trying to understand what happened to me. Lately in my life, in the last couple of years, I have had a new perspective on it. I had a guest on. I was going to have a guest on. My friend Heather Wade, Kingdom and I Radio, had told me, I have a really good guest for you. Have you heard Terry Lovelace? I'm like, yeah, that was a great show. He's an alien abductee. I would love to have him. She introduced me to him. And he's like, I'll send you my book. Incident at Devil's Den is what it's called. And it's about a lot, but it really is about an incident that happened in, I think, 1976 with him and a friend out in Devil's Den, Arkansas, on a camping trip where they were abducted by a triangular-shaped craft by aliens. And he also was being abducted before that from his early childhood. He just didn't realize it then. So it's a whole story, and I highly recommend anybody read this because it changed me reading it because it made me think about before that shadow person experience. I did have something happen to me I would not think about. It's like my brain was wired not to think about it. All the weirdness, all the stuff I would study, all my interest in aliens, but yet I would not think about this incident until I read this book. It's like my brain was wired not to remember it, but it brought it all back. Maybe because Terry's incident was in a camping trip and mine was a camping trip. And it was with my friend Lance, who went through the same shadow person experience. And this camping trip happened before, when I was 16, going on 17, right before, it was the summer before that, we first encountered it when we went to that party, that shadow. I don't know if they're connected, but I started thinking about it because a lot of abductees talk about psychokinetic things that happen and seeing shadow people and all this afterwards. But I never thought about those things until I read Terry's book because of his camping trip, and it brought back this camping trip. When I was on this camping trip, I did not have a negative experience like Terry did. But we were in a place called Red River Gorge, Kentucky. Beautiful place. A lot of fish heads like to go camp
Kentucky is so haunted.
Well, this is like roughneck camping. Like there's no bathroom. There's no nothing. You're literally hiking 2 miles or more out to your campsite. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and they're beautiful. It's beautiful. That's why you go there. We camp right near this cliff. I remember going out there and with Lance, and we had gotten really tired for some reason, even though we were so excited to be there. But we had set up camp and everything, got really tired, and we went to bed early that night. And I thought we'd be up all late. Here I am out in the middle of nowhere in the woods. I shouldn't fall asleep, but I did. I even slept with my shoes on because I wanted to be able to run for it if I had to. This was my first alone camping trip as an adult. I was 16, not an adult, minor, but still on my own with a buddy. I'd never done that before. And so I slept with my shoes on. And I remember that night falling right away to sleep and having this really weird dream where I was floated out of my tent. And I remember hovering and looking down at the floors below me. And there was like a bright light behind me, but I couldn't get my body even to float or turn around to see it. All I know is a bright light behind me. That's the most vivid part I remember. After that, everything becomes kind of hazy. All I can say is I remember seeing like a control room of a ship. That's all I can say, and I can't remember much more. When I woke up the next day, or that morning, really early in the morning, like the sun had just started to come up. It was a mist outside because it was really early morning. I woke up. I was turned around in the tent from where I originally was sleeping. And it's a small tent. It was me and Lance sharing it. And my boots were off, just laying at the other end of the tent at the opening. Like I had to have taken them off, then turned up and turned around. I guess then I was still a deep sleeper. After the shadow person experience, I was a light sleeper, I guess. So I at that time I figured I guess I just moved to my sleep. But Lance was gone, and I remember feeling panicked that he wasn't there. And I get up and I find him at the cliff, this beautiful cliff that was just down this trail that looks out the whole Forest Valley, Red River Gorge. And I go, something weird happened. I was like, I got turned around and my shoes were off. I don't remember doing that. He goes, yeah, I woke up. You were that way. I'm like, We sit there and we're listening to the birds chirping. It's so early morning. He had made coffee. And we're sitting there, and I just thought about that. I'm like, that was a weird dream. Out here, I'm kind of like too much. At that time, I'll tell you what, I'd already read Communion. I've already know about alien abduction.
Oh, yeah.
So I wrote it off as my imagination. We're sitting there, and suddenly, we were like singing. He was like whistling to the birds. I can't whistle, but he was like doing this whole musical thing with the birds. You could hear him communicating through the forest early morning, back and forth. It was really fun, but suddenly, and I'm still sitting there thinking about this dream, it gets really quiet. All the birds stop. All the bug sounds stop. Everything gets really quiet, and we look at each other. That's like kind of weird. And out over the forest floor to our right, this beam of light shoots up through the mist because there's this mist covering through the trees. You can't see below the mist. Mm-hmm. This huge light. I mean, it would be as big as a house. Like a beam of light for 5 or 6 seconds shoots up into the sky. And I'm like, what the hell? And then it's gone. Later in the day, we tried to figure out what it was. Lance insisted it had to be somebody had one of those big like Batman spotlights. I'm like, that light was bigger than a Batman spotlight. I don't know what you're talking about. So that happened. I don't know if that was alien related or not, but I do know it was not long after that the shadow person's experiences started. And Terry confided to me after, he's had shadow experiences after his alien abduction. I had other dreams I would just write off about having an alien in my room, a gray. And when it would touch me, it would be the same feeling that I had, that same hopelessness and darkness that the shadow person experience gave me. But I always wrote them off as dreams. It's just I've seen too much Communion. I've seen Fire in the Sky. And I always wrote them off. And that's probably why I was wired not to think about any of it. I didn't think about any of it until I read Terry Lovelace's book. And then it started thinking about all these things I just wrote off. I mean, there was one time I was sick. I was so sick, and this is when I was living at my parents' house still. I couldn't breathe. Like, I had such congestion, and I was smoking, of course. And this is probably, I was like 20. And I was so congested, and I had this dream where these aliens took me, and they put a bunch of they forced a thing down my throat, and I'm struggling with them, and they're trying to calm me down and tell me it's all right, we're trying to help you. And they put this fluid in my lungs, and they're like showing me through telepathy what they're doing and trying to help me, and they like clear and wash my lungs. And when I woke up, guess what? I had no congestion. I felt perfectly fine. They were telling me stop smoking. It took many years before I stopped smoking after that. But I wrote that off as a dream. I just found it funny that I was like 100% better after being completely sick. So how these things are connected, if they're connected to my shadow person experience, I don't know. It's something more recent. I've trying to reconcile with myself. I don't know if I'm an alien abductee. I've had some strange markings. Like I once woke up when I was I think this happened not long after the camping trip, actually. I woke up at home. My mom thought I'd burnt myself with a cigarette because she had caught me smoking in my room around 16. I'm like, I don't smoke in my room anymore, Mom. I don't. But I woke up with this perfectly round, burnt circle on my face. It was like somebody took a cigarette and put it out on my face. When I woke up, I remember walking into the bathroom and seeing this pure crystalline gel on my face. And I wiped it off. And then there was a circle, this burnt circle. It didn't hurt, but it was there for a couple months. What that was, I don't know. Just all these things. I don't have answers. I'm still questioning all of it. And I don't know if I always will be, or if I will get those answers. I don't know. And it's why I do my show, because I'm looking for other people's experiences. We're all holders of pieces of the puzzle to this. All of our experiences are clues to what it is. And then I call the show Paranormal Soup because I believe all these things could be connected. And I didn't even really realize maybe a connection with the alien thing until I read Terry Lovelace's book and talked to him in private about his personal experiences he didn't even put in the book. So I'm still trying to figure this out. I still don't know what the shadow person experience is, or, what I can't tell you what I experienced, give you any definition. It was a demon or it was an alien or interdimensional. I don't know. All I know is what I've experienced and what I've told you here. And that's why I tell my story. I remember when I first started coming out more about my experiences, I told one of my wife's childhood friends that came over to visit us, and he called me a damn liar.
Wow. In your own
and
house.
I basically said, you know what? F you. And after that, you know what? I thought, I don't care what people think. It was not long after that I started thinking about doing a show. Because you know what? I'm tired of hiding myself, hiding my experiences. And I need some way to get this outlet out. Because I try to tell people and they look at me like crazy. You can't talk to your coworkers about it. You can't talk to people about this. But this is so much my experience. I have no one to talk to but my wife, who's love of my life. And great. I'm very lucky to have her and be able to have somebody to talk to. But I wanted more. I wanted to reach out. And I want to know your experience. Here's mine. And that's why I started doing Paranormal Soup.
Okay, I'll say something. I had a weird experience one time when I was a young man, and I thought that it was a dream, but my friend Chad had the same experience from when we were teenagers, and I thought, wow, what is the chances of that? And it was actually a blue. Let's see. It was actually a bluish looking, gray, like the light they gave off, but it was like these really tall, grayish looking aliens, and they had this blue light around them. And I told my friend about it at school the next day, and he was like, I think I was like a sophomore. And he goes, yeah, I had this weird dream. And I was like, that's not a dream. It's like when you were talking about your cousin in the head. I said, dude, I dreamed that. And so I never did know what that was, but I remember them just coming into my room in the apartment I lived in when I first moved into Austin, and I have no idea why. Never have had any other experiences until I got with my wife of now 4 years, but I've seen 3 times now these little look like a BB in the sky. It's just like a circular silver.
I've seen something similar.
Yeah, and then they just disappear, and I'm sitting there going like, what in the hell is that? And so I don't know. It's a very weird phenomenon. I think it's all connected, but my wife believes that she may have had something,
Yeah, I can't say I'm like being abducted all the time. Terry Lovelace's experiences are way more extreme than mine. So I don't know. I'm not willing to accept it yet, but I will tell you this. I had to think hard about it because it interviewing other abductees over the years now, and it seems like people who are abducted or even have like one encounter are wired not to look at it, not to think about it.
That's weird. I mean, like I said, when I fell asleep at that, what it was like a school, and we worked there overnight, and there was nobody there. It was just you, and it was notoriously haunted. My brother used to walk through there and say that he would hear knocking on the walls. We had another guy that worked there named Patrick, said the same thing. And one time I found Patrick scared hiding in one of the utility closets.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, Pat, what are you doing here? He wasn't asleep. And he goes, dude, I'm really freaked out. I'm having a panic attack. I need to go home. And I said, obviously. So he left, and I finished a shift, and I was with my nephew Zane, and he went for a walk. And there was a donut shop, like an all-night donut shop. Mrs. Johnson's Baker is famous. It's a really good place. And he goes, I'm going to go for a walk. So when he was walking through there, well, lo and behold, he sees something, and he couldn't really describe it. He said it was like something looking out the window for a second, and then he heard the knock. And I was just like, I don't think this is all by accident. It's not by chance. And then that night I was by myself. All of a sudden, 3 a.m. on the dot, and I'm just like, I can't stay awake, even after taking a double shot espresso, which I didn't even really need because I felt like I was wide awake. I was feeling good, and I was actually listening to Coast to Coast. It was kind of a boring episode, so I just was kind of like, it's not that great. It was about, I believe the episode was about, what do you call it? Perpetual motion, like energy, perpetual energy, whatever. So it's kind of
free energy shows.
Free energy shows. It was kind of boring, and I just kind of listened to it, but I've heard it before. Subscribed to Discover Magazine, Scientific American, all that. So I was like, okay, I've already heard all this. So I'm sitting there, and I am very cerebral of a person. I was kind of a jock at time, and played ball and everything else, but I also was a bookworm. I read all the time. And so I guess I was probably the only jock that played Dungeons and Dragons in the lunchroom, in the library. I actually did. And one time, a funny story, kind of a sidelight to that, me and my mom went out to grab something to eat this place called Taco Cabana. It's very popular down here. It's almost like a really, really good version of Taco Bell, where it's like it's good, pretty decent Mexican food, and it's like you just go through the drive-thru, and it's kind of fast food Mexican food, but it's pretty good. So anyway, my mom went, we went to go get something, and this guy that I went to high school with, he was really nice. He saw me. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he gave us a bunch of free stuff, and he told my mom that when I went to school there with him, that it was kind of like if you were kind of a nerd, it was like, Wolf was your friend, nobody would mess with you. And he's like, when he went to school there, he goes, because I could beat up everybody. I mean, I was a boxer and I was tough, tough kid. And so I had this group of friends that I hung out with, and a lot of them were kind of the outcast kids, but they played Dungeons and Dragons, and I liked it. I started playing that when I was like 11 years old with my friend Keith, and we lived in the country and we had nothing to do. So that's what we did. And so when I hooked up with these kids, they were kind of the nerds. And so my friends that played football, they were like, why are you hanging out with those guys? Those are nerds, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, why do I read books and you don't?
Right.
Why am I, why am I the only one that's really interested in any kind of, reading or anything else, and they kind of left me alone because, I could pretty much, handle myself pretty well. And I did quite often. And, so he told my mom that mom that always touched my mom, that I was like nice to those kids. I wasn't a bully, and I actually defended them, protected them. And a couple of my friends got me involved in reading Brad Steiger, and they were like into that. My one friend was a big ghost. He was into ghosts, and so I went to his house, and I had another friend that was kind of like into monsters, and I kind of gravitated toward that only because of what I'd seen when I was 15, and I had that story, and I told it, and had a lot of weird experiences. So, I became friends with those kids. But the only time I ever had any kind of alien anything was that time. I think it was a dream, but and nothing happened as far as I remember. I just remember them like kind of fading back into the wall. Yeah. And I'm thinking, man, that was, I woke up the next day and it didn't hit me till like, second period in school. And I was like, what was that? Was that a dream? How you have a dream and then you don't even realize it until later on, Yeah.
And I was sitting there.
Yeah. And in first period, I actually would tutor some of the remedial kids. That was, I helped do that, you know, and I was kind of ahead on my credits. And so I had second period is when I started doing my actual school work, you know. And so I was actually a tutor. And so in second period, I had this weird, like I was just sitting there doing like English 2 or whatever it was, English 3 at that time. And I just go, whoa, what the heck? And then I felt like I was dizzy and I thought I was going to black out. So I stood up and I told the teacher, something's wrong, I'm about to pass out, you know. I was having anxiety.
Yeah.
Teacher was really cool. He talked real proper. He wasn't from England, but he talked like he was because he was an English teacher. Very one of those real into, you know, English. You talk proper, you know. Real nice guy. He took me out in the hallway and he goes, "Just breathe. Are you okay? I'm going to take you to the nurse." We walked to the nurse's station, whatever. And I told her, I said, "Well, last night I had a weird dream, and I just started hyperventilating and freaking out in class, and felt like I was going to pass out." And she was like, "Well, what happened?" And I told her. And she was just like, you could tell she was like chomping at the bit to say something more about it, but she wasn't at liberty to do it because it's a public school and you can't do that. And so she was just like, I could say some things, but I'm not going to. She wasn't that much older than me. I think she was in her early 20s. And I was like, I think at that time I was like 16, going on almost 17. Well, a few years later, I ended up working at a bar and she walked in there. Because the owner of the bar's hairstylist was friends with her, and I recognized her as the school nurse. And she came up to me, and I'm not kidding. I was standing there with I think Squid, my brother. Squid's one of the guys working. He's a Navy SEAL, he's a good guy. And she came right up to me and she said, "Do you remember me? I used to work at the." She's like, "You're one of the only students I remember very vividly." And we only had one conversation. It was about aliens in your room. And I said, "Yeah, I had a dream about that." "Yeah, oh, you were the nurse." She goes, "Yeah." And she goes, "I want you to know," she goes, that wasn't a dream. And she told me, she started talking about all this stuff. And of course, she's also drunk when she's telling me this because she's been at the club drinking and partying and stuff. And we became friends. And I got to know her boyfriend who worked at another bar down the street, who was actually a friend of mine. And I said, I didn't know that y'all were dating. And then they ended up getting married, and she was like a few years older than us. But she was very adamant that she had been abducted, and it was very similar. These things came through a wall. And then, of course, like I said, I've gotten a report of, one of these alien looking creatures, evolving into like like this shadow, going from a shadow into one of these alien type entities. And, there's some that believe wholeheartedly that there's some sort of an agenda of demonic entities that are trying to masquerade for some big
as aliens.
And who the heck knows what, because, we're just peons here. We don't know. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to feel our way through it,
Where it's all semantics. What we're talking about is all the same thing. It's just different, what you want to call tomato. The anxiety you felt when you remembered the dream right there, that panic attack, is a really big clue, Josh, to alien abductions. When people that have a sudden flash of their experience, they experience exactly what you experience. You really need to read Incident at Devil's Den by Terry Lovelace, and he's a good friend of mine.
What's the name of it?
On your show. Incident at Devil's Den by Terry Lovelace.
Okay. Let me ask you another question.
Definitely a highly recommended guest to have.
I had a. Let me tell you something, and this is something I wanted to ask you. I used to work at it, and this is weird too. There's a lot of weird things that kind of sidelights that go to all this. There was a guy that was a Buddhist shaman. Now he called himself a worker. He didn't say I'm a Buddhist shaman, but he was a Buddhist, and he definitely was a shaman, and he was very good at it. He even read my mind. He proved it, and it was very, very. He was good at it. And he told me, he says, when you sleep, he goes, you astral project. Well, when we were working together, we'd work these really long shifts, and they had like a guy that would sit in the control room that was from that facility that actually lived on site. And I was the guard, and sometimes he'd go, hey, I'm going to go to my room and take a nap. Can you watch everything? Sure. There's two of us. And it's not that big of a place. And so sometimes I would say, hey, can I take a nap? And she said, sure. Well, I went to his room and something grabbed my pant leg, And then I heard voices talking in some weird, which I later found was like Asian. It was like a type of Asian dialect that's no longer spoken. And that's what I was told. But this guy, he was the real deal, and his name was David, and he actually, my brother was a Satanist, heavily into the dark arts, and he unhooked some sort of entity from my brother and me and 3 of my friends, one who's now deceased, who we do an art contest in his honor. But we were all there, and we saw my brother kind of levitate off the ground a few inches. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
And he pulled something off of his back and he said it looked almost reptilian. David could see it. And so he was a real deal. And one of the things that I learned from him, I asked him one time, we talked about alien abduction one night, and he said, "You are absolutely safe from that." He told me that. And I said, how do you know that? And he goes, "Let me tell you something." And he made a joke about it. He said, if you were abducted, if you got abducted today, he goes, they've already looked at you. You are not something that they want. He goes, they don't want you. He goes, you would be a big hassle. That's what he told me, and I'm going like, what do you mean? And he said, well, there was a time when you were younger that they looked at you, and they look for candidates for this stuff, and they decided against it. And he said, if they took you up in their ship, and if you were somebody observed, this is what he said. Okay, and he said it in front of several of my friends, and everybody laughed, thought it was funny. But I don't know. It was kind of funny, but it was also kind of weird. I was just trying to take it all in. But he said, imagine an alien craft flying through the air, and then it just starts shaking all over the place and then crashes. And he said, that was that. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, I don't know. He goes, that's the image in my mind that I got when I meditated on what you said. Because he said, give me a day, let me think about it. He said, they would not take you up there. He goes, it's not going to work. There's certain people that are built. It's built into them. He said, the best they could do is try to sedate you, and it's not going to hold. And he goes, and then you're going to do things, that you don't even know you're capable of. Now that's weird.
See, no, it isn't to me, because there's a lot to my experience I haven't gotten into, and we're not going to have time tonight to get into. But that relate kind of to that. Me and my cousin Phil that saw the green floating head had a lot of dreams, experiences were alien related that we joked about and thought was Dragon Ball Z influence, but it's similar to kind of what you're talking about. When I was that camping trip, one of the thoughts I had when I was floating in the air and I had this light behind me is like, they found me. I don't know what that's about. That was the thought in my head. They found me. I don't know what that's about. There's so much to this I don't understand. I'm still trying to understand. But one of the things, we were talking about, the black dog, Beware the Dog episode, and black dogs, and how they, and Dogman, and, all these different creatures, and like Skinwalker Ranch and the Beast in the Field. We were talking about with how the Bell Witch and Skinwalker Ranch started. All these things I've thought about for years, about how people have had these different experiences where things, people see creatures like you have, and I haven't seen like a Dogman or anything like that, but I was always interested into the Men in Black, and the Black-Eyed Kids, like David Weatherly's really investigated,
Oh, yeah.
All these are different kinds of manifestations that do one thing. Fear.
Yeah. That's what the Black-Eyed Kids are. That's their MO.
Right. But all these things in some way are they don't take on like some happy form to draw you in. Now they do sometimes in alien abduction experiences. Sometimes they come across as, something friendly to draw a child in. But, most of the time, people are having experiences, they're frightening, and these things take on frightening forms. And I've always been interested in psychokinetic energy, haunted places, or places that have energy like Skinwalker Ranch. I had Barry Taff on. One of the cases I've always been interested in, or 2 cases actually, is that he's worked on, is a parapsychologist, one of the very beginning parapsychologists, was the Entity case, which was made into a book.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. California.
And another one in California is the San Pedro case with Jackie Hernandez.
Never heard of that.
If you've ever seen that, you should find the documentary of it. It's hard to find. I have it on VHS somewhere. It's hard to find, but there's videos of some of the stuff that they did that Barry Taff and the other investigators involved in that did. I mean, they had blood coming down the walls in that investigation on video. Somebody almost got hung up in the attic. It's crazy stuff. And this is like 80s.
No, I think I remember that. And he was like being he was like suspended in the air. Being choked, like I know
it was a hanger, or it was like it was a hookman's tie rope,
and
like
it was in the attic, right?
It was in the attic.
Yes, I remember that.
But in that case, it followed Jackie Hernandez. Barry Taft's idea on all these situations with the entity and with Jackie Hernandez is that it's environment and person. So it's like you have a record and a needle, and the person's the needle and the record's the environment, and you'll get these manifestations when the two meet. It's some kind of psychokinetic energy that happens between environment and person. I myself, over the years, and I'm nowhere near as brilliant as Barry Taft, but I have a feeling that it's 1/3 aspect of that. It's person, environment, and parasitic entity.
Mm-hmm.
Look at it as a pool of energy that attracts a entity we can't see.
Mm-hmm.
It's beyond our perception, but it's attracted by this energy. But it's also attracted by our energy, and emotions are energy. If you see auras, which I've had that experience, emotions give off different energies.
Mm-hmm.
And if something can feed off of this, and let's say it likes the taste of fear from a person, what's it going to do? It watches early man. Think of early man in its beginning. If these things have been around us and they're a part of our life and we don't realize, and they've been here always, early man would be out in the woods hunting. And when would they get that frightened feeling? Is when they encounter a beast in the field. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
They'd encounter a monster, a saber-toothed tiger. I don't know what early man encountered when they were hunting. Things that would scare them, usually be beast-like.
Yeah.
That would be their threat. So these things early on would learn to take on that form to get what it wanted.
Yeah,
the beast in the field.
And how you said the Bell Witch started, that is what happened. I mean, there was a beast in the field that they encountered, some sort of creature. And then the Skinwalker Ranch, same thing, the wolf-like entity. They shot it, and nothing happened. There was no blood. It just was there. And so, you're absolutely right. They started those, and then all kinds of weirdness ensued. And they both started the same way.
If you look at all the ancient traditions of like the jinn, the fairies of European lore, they're all shapeshifters,
and they're from the same family, but I think that they're regional. Like the jinn are in the desert and in Arabia, in the Arabian desert, and then of course
the jinn are not immortal. They have lifespans.
Yeah, they do. They're just really long.
They reproduce. So do the fairy realms. They have lifespans and they reproduce. I had a guest on years ago named Terrence Palmer that wrote a book, The Science of Spiritual Possession. And in his studies and research, he believes they're parasitic entities. And it's really creepy when he gets in, because he does they do hypnotherapy sessions with clients. And they do psychics evaluate it and all that, and he does it like energy readings and all this stuff. It's a whole like college book, like it's a huge book. But one of the things he said in an interview that creeped me out, he's like, these parasitic entities latch onto people, like your friend. He said that the reptilian like thing attached to him. Mm-hmm. He said they latch on into your energy field.
That was my brother. Actually, my brother.
Right, they attach to your energy field for reproduction. And he says, when you get super psychokinetic events around people, this is them in a reproduction phase. They are producing offspring in your energy field. They're literally laying astral eggs in your energy field.
Oh, my gosh.
And you know what? I've had experiences with seeing auras and seeing shapes in people's energy and feeling energy off of people. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to that. And what if we are? I mean, besides feeding on us, they are using us to reproduce in their realm.
And they even have a society too, like the Sealy Court. And I know you know what that is. The Fae have the Sealy Court, and then there's the Unsealy Court.
You have the Scottish, you have the Welsh Court, and then you have the traditional Irish Court. They're a little bit different.
To me, it's just like regional. If you go to one region, they have their spirits, and it's kind of like bacteria, you know. Bacteria is like, this is my spot, you know. And the thing that people don't realize is that they're not all friends either. They don't get along. That's why they're in different regions. It's not, and they will compete too. There was the case that I did outside of my hometown, and that farm, there were two different things going on. There was a Dogman type entity that was roaming around outside, but then there was the shadow man that was inside. And according to the little boy, you know, who, you know, his aunt and his mother and everybody, they all told me, you know, they said that the little boy was telling him that the Dogman didn't like the shadow man and vice versa.
Yeah, I remember that part.
And it was so weird. And I told that story on DER, and it was just like, I don't even know what that was and why that was. But the little boy was relieved when they took him to his aunt's, because he no longer had to see the shadow person. But then after a few days, it showed up over there. And then the little boy said, we need to go back. He started asking to go back to the farm because the wolf-like entity was his friend, supposedly, and it would eat the shadow person. What I found interesting about that is there's actually a historical basis for that. And there's a book I read called Legends of the Fire Spirits. And what it is it just talks about all the Arabian legends of the jinn, that even the ones that predate Islam, because a lot of people think that they came with Islam. No, they were there before.
To
Zoroastrian, yes, exactly. Yeah. The Zoroastrians, because and so what they believe is that these there's a one called the Guela, the New Guela, or the Nagula. It just depends on the
where you get from Ghoul.
Ghoul, yeah, or Guala. The different translations, and there's so many different dialects, and so that's what it's basically a type of ghoul, and what it does is it feeds upon people, and it also feeds upon dead flesh, and the only creature that it's afraid of is a wolf. Now, some of the translations are a little weird. It's like this wolf, it says can act and think like a man, in some of the translations, and you're going like, what in the heck is that? You know, some theorize, you know, me amongst them, that this could be a Dogman, and one of their jobs is to clear the area of certain spirits. What are they? What are
Guardians of the Gate.
Guardians of the Dead. Anubis, we were talking about that. Yeah. And we talked about the black dog. And the Mexican legend, the Cadejo, what it does, that is a curse that's brought upon somebody when they say somebody's celoso, you know. And they give somebody the eye or whatever, you know, and so they're jealous. You have a woman that I want you out of the way, so they conjure up the black dog. The black dog can take life. If you go to the bruja and she casts the spell, well, this black dog rips people apart. Long story short, after it's done ripping people apart, they look perfectly normal, except their heart is stopped. And then there's the black dog did its job. It runs back out into the woods or whatever, leaves the field, goes back into the woods, killed the worker or whatever that it was. Next thing you know, so-and-so's going out with the former lover of that person in that person's memory, you know. It's a type of magic, you know, of summoning, you know, but these things are very much associated with death. Hecate of the Greek
service.
Yeah. She is not only the goddess of the dead, you know, but she's also the goddess of dogs.
Yeah.
Which is very odd. You know, one time I was at a job site in Round Rock. It's right. It just Austin runs right into Round Rock. There's no border at all. It's just right there. And so I was in Round Rock and I was doing a job there. And it was very weird. I had this like weird waking dream. I don't know if you've ever had that, where you're just kind of sitting there, and next thing you know, you zone out.
Yes.
And the thought of that entity popped into my head for no reason at all. I don't even know why it came to me. And then I look down and I see this black, what would look like a Rottweiler, but it's just a black, solid black one. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And it's just trotting by my truck. And it stops, looks up at me, has the one paw up. I'll never forget. I was looking right at it. And I was just getting ready to get out and take a number one. Because I was just like, there's nobody around. It's just you in an abandoned building. I figured I'd, take a leak in this thing. And I said, oh, no. And it was big. And so then it kind of, how they kind of move their mouth back and forth while they're debating about what they what you are, who you are.
Yeah. Are you lunch?
Are you a friend or foe? And typically if a dog is roaming around and it's by itself and it's not, and if its own turf, it's not aggressive. So it's kind of like that. It took off. But for the rest of the night, I thought, how weird is that thought popped into my head, and then a black dog comes running by. And I've already had my experiences with some black dogs in my hometown. Right. And so I'm sitting there going like, this is so weird, that just happened. And so I was later on, I get bored, at night, and I call some of the guys that I work with, because some of these guys I've been working for years. So I'm like, who's awake? Because we had this work thread. There's about 14 of us on there. And so 2 or 3 people popped up and said, hey, I'm on so-and-so site. And so we started talking. And I was like, man, that's had a weird experience. Well, found out that another guard had a very odd experience with 2 black dogs in that same parking lot. Same thing happened. And he had gotten out to do, and he was like, man, I'm tired. And, you drink a lot of water because it was hot. It was like summertime, And he said, man, it was middle of the night and I got out, and these 2 dogs were right around the other side of one of the generators. And I was like, well, what the heck? And so they started growling. So I didn't want to run. He goes, but I turned, I walked quickly back, got in we had an SUV. He's like, get back in my SUV. And they just come riding up to the window and looking in at me. And he said they looked like black Rottweilers without the brown on them. Yep. But exactly same shape and everything. And
it's like the dog I dream of. And I have had recurring dreams. I'm in a cemetery, and it's a lot bigger than a Rottweiler, but it looks like one. And it's completely black, and it comes down this hill, this cemetery, and comes towards me.
And you've told me that
so many times.
And what happens in the dream?
It always ends with me running for our car and getting the hell out of there. It's usually my wife's with me in these dreams. I didn't start having these till 10 years ago.
Why is that?
I don't know. I sum it up maybe as a supernatural influence because I'm a big fan of this show Supernatural, but I do notice I've had bad luck and things to turn not so good negative energy wise when I do have these dreams. So I don't know if it's a warning. I don't know what, but I've been fascinated, with the black dogs because of those dreams. Because they're just so powerful, so much like it's just such a spooky feeling, and I see it in my head. This thing, how it just like comes down like a snake almost, the way it like comes down through the graveyard, like it's coming towards us, not running towards us, but it's coming.
Well, what are
like
your
scared as hell? I've had this dream like so many times now.
What are your thoughts on like, and we've talked a little bit. I told you a little bit about the story where a buddy of mine was a DJ out in Marfa, Texas, and he was living out there. His girlfriend was kind of like hippie, hey man, let's go live out there and be artists, man. And there's like nothing to do out there, man. So he's a DJ with no work, man. But I really wasn't a big fan of his girlfriend. She was like a dreamer, but to the point of like detrimental. And we kind of told him, there's nobody, there's nothing there. My grandpa lived there. My grandma and grandpa lived there for a while when I was young. And I was like, there's nothing out there. It's a very spiritual place. And the Marfa Lights, folks, you look it up. They're really crazy. But, our neighbor, when I was a kid and I'd stayed out there with my grandparents, she claimed to have seen the Marfa Lights multiple times. And she was like always out there kind of acting like Stevie Nicks and playing, years later, I'm thinking she was like that lady, but she was out there with crystals and rocks and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, right down the street from where my grandparents lived, this guy, they bought a little house, and they had these adobe type houses. Some of them were, and so they stayed cool in the summer because it's kind of hot, but then the weather's pretty cool. If it's not summer, it gets pretty cold up there because it's in the Chinati Mountains. Well, they were driving and they saw these 2 dogmen literally in a cemetery, and it looked almost like they were play fighting. Then of course it culminated with, and I told the story on DER too, it culminated with them having a Halloween party where their back door got kicked in, not completely kicked in because it was solid, but it kicked like a hole in the bottom. And when Cosmel had gone outside and had the flashlight, it was like something swiped his hand, and he saw this weird looking paw type hand, and then the light shined up for a minute on this wolf-like face, and he was like, oh my gosh, and it's one of these creatures, and they had unscrewed the light bulb. So these things they were very intelligent, they had this ability, and he goes scrambling back into the house, and as that thing kicks the door, and then he looks, and there were like two more standing there, but one that looked almost like a shadow. It was just like a shadow, but it was like hard to describe. He said that it was almost like somebody scribbled it up and down. Now, I was not able to tell all of that on Vic's show, because Vic, poo-poos the woo, as he calls it. And so he doesn't really allow, and at that time I didn't have the kind of clout, to tell that, Once I told the story about that farm outside of my hometown, he let me talk about the shadow entity and the poltergeist activity, because I had built up enough cred that, I could talk about that. But back then he was real adamant. He would edit out. He didn't want to hear anything about woo.
Should have been on my show.
Jason didn't know you had it back then. I would have, and I could have told you the whole story, but because there's more to that story than just what was told on DER, he said that these entities look kind of scribbly like. If you took like a just go up and down with like a black charcoal or something, because his girlfriend would. This is weird. Okay, his girlfriend was before all this happened. Okay, their house that they lived in had an entity in it. And she would do not automatic writing, but I would call it automatic drawing. So she would take like pieces of black charcoal, like I don't know how to describe it, like, because she did it when they were living here in Austin. She did the same thing, and I saw her do it. She would just go up and down a piece of paper with this sort of chalky black. I don't know what it is, Jason. I'm not an artist at all. I have no artistic abilities. I don't have any music. Everybody in my family plays an instrument but me. Okay, I'm the pugilist. That's my job. I fight. Anyway, up and down, and this weird like Bigfoot type entity like appeared on the paper, and me and a bunch of my friends saw it. My brother Scorpion. We were all like, "Wow, that's cool. That's crazy looking." And she's like, yeah, man, this is what I see in my dreams, and like I said, she took that, it was like a little too much, and then she'd nod off because she's, doing whatever she's doing, and so then he went out there to live with her, and he said, hey, he came back to visit every now and then, we were friends, and he said, hey, there's something in our house, and he knew that I collected stories. Even back then I was big on that, and the club was haunted. And so I'd go there during the afternoon, do liquor order, and I'd hear pool balls clanging upstairs. And sometimes he'd come in to set up early, and we would hear stuff, and we kind of look at each other, and I'd be like, see. So he told me, he goes, dude, I know you believe in this, and you have, some experience with this, because I lived in a house that was pretty jacked up. So then he tells me, my girlfriend, who now is his wife, but he said that she was scribbling up and down with the charcoal, and it was creating this wolf-looking thing. And he said that this thing was communicating with them in their dreams, like they'd go to sleep.
Yeah.
And this thing would show up in the dream and be standing there in the corner of the room. And you know how you wake up and you're like, what am I looking at? And then as a kid, this happened to me once. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I had this, I always played baseball since I was little bitty, like Little League and all that. So I grabbed like this little wooden bat, I had, and I was getting ready to, aluminum bat, I'm sorry, getting ready to like attack this thing. And then I yell to charge at it or whatever. And just then my sister had turned the light on. And it was just a jacket draped over my backpack over a chair, and I was like, and I went and I hit it. It was nothing there. Okay. But for him, it was kind of the same thing. He was like, what is that? So he flips on the light and there's nothing there. And so he goes, okay, I'm just in he could never wake her up. She was always out, always asleep, She had like this.
Sorry.
That's funny. She had like this addiction, I guess you would call it. I'm going to be honest. She took stuff to sleep, and it was like, she'd be like, oh, hey man, take one drink, and then poof, and so what happened was he tried to wake her up. He's like, hey, she won't wake up, of course. So then he turns the light off, and there it is again. So like, but then there's nothing there. So he's like, it's not like one of those things where you see like a chair and there's like a bag over it, like what I told him that happened to me. He goes, no, dude, it wasn't like that. He's telling me and Squid and D and Scorpion, all of us, like what's going on, and we're all listening to this guy. And he said, I took a bat and I jumped up and I went at it. And when I did, I knocked a huge hole in the wall. Then she wakes up and she's like, what did you do? And then the next day she's really angry because they knocked the hole in the wall. Right. And he said, your creature thing or whatever it is that you're seeing, made me do that. And that was a terrible thing. Because then she's just like, oh, you're going to blame me for it. Your aura is what brought it. It's drawn to you. And then it was back and forth. And then that one night they were going to the only all-night diner that was there at that time. And they're driving down the road and they see those two wolf-like creatures. And I think they were meant to see it.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, they invite their friend over to, and she's goofy, dingy person too. And so she was chopping up something for the party and she cut herself and she looks up and she sees this thing in the window. And then of course it was all this stuff that went on. And they heard this loud howling in the back and there were people that were back there smoking and they came running inside because they didn't know what it was. Well, to me, I don't know. I mean, to me, that was like a spiritual entity sort of manifesting itself as physical. Yes, it kicked a hole in the door. Yes, it did physical things, but these were definitely manifestations of demonic entities of some sort. I mean, there's no other way to describe it.
I don't have much. It's getting pretty late, but I want to leave on this point I want to get to. When I talk about these things being changelings and all the myth and lore, all the different cultures, and I talk about parasitic entities we can't see that are maybe feeding off our emotions and playing back at our inner fears, ancient inner fears, like archetypal inner fears, like Jungian. What are we afraid of is the early beasts that we encountered in the woods, like I mentioned before. I always like to use this. I'm a Star Wars fan.
Oh yeah, me too.
and I always use this as an example. You remember in Empire Strikes Back, when Luke is on Dagobah, and the cave that Yoda tells him to go into, because the dark side's there, very strong. Dark side's presence. He tells him weapons. I can't do a Yoda impression. Weapons not needed, or whatever he tells him. He tells him not to bring his weapons.
Yeah, just go in there.
Because what you bring in with you
is what's going to attack you.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. And I think that's how this kind of works. Because Luke goes in there, and what happens? He brings his weapons, and next thing you know, he's in a lightsaber fight with good old Pop.
Yeah,
with Darth Vader. And then he cuts his head off and sees his own face. He faces his own inner fear. And what he knows deep down that he doesn't want to accept. I think that's how these things react to us. They react to our instinctual innate fears, stuff that's from the beginning of man, the beast phenomenon. And they can form into a lot of different things to get what they want, be it food or procreation, as Terrence Palmer theorize that they're using us to procreate. But what we're dealing with is something that is parasitic in a sense, and it reflects our inner self. It reflects our inner darkness.
Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated with the Tibetan tulpa.
The tulpas. Oh yes, absolutely.
And so how much of this is entities in another realm or parasitic that are basically shaped by our own inner thought, our own inner subconscious too. Even alien experiences, why not? If they can take on the form of a dogman, they could take on the form of an alien. Whatever it is that's going to get at you the way they need, to feed on you the way they need. I'm not saying aliens are this, but maybe some instances are, or maybe there's a connection. I don't know. But I have a growing theory that a lot of, especially psychokinetic activity that happens in homes, is related to this one environment, as Barry Taff had said, to the person. And 3, he doesn't add this part in, but my third part is a parasitic entity that lives in that energy field. And the field changes the person and leaves them susceptible to a parasitic-like infection. Because what happens, like the Jackie Hernandez case, the San Pedro case, she left that home. She never had experiences before then. And they said it was all her. She's got super psychokinetic activity. I get that. but it followed her. That's why they she moved whole towns away, and she still was having these experiences. I mean, she took pictures of glowing balls of light in her home that are amazing. I don't think she was making any of this up. It was destroying her life. She really didn't want much to do with it, except that she did have like a love interest with one of the investigators, like she was totally into it. And that's why they thought it was psychokinetic, because it was the guy that got attacked. Or it was not the guy that got attacked. It was the guy that got attacked was like interfering with the guy she was interested in. That's a whole other show. Watch the Barry Taff episode.
So it could have been she was subconsciously launching.
So they
it.
look at it as all coming from her, which maybe they're right, but I think there's a parasitic entity involved in this. It's like jumping in a pond of leeches that all attach to you. And you come out and the leeches are still attached. I've had so many people tell me I never had a paranormal experience before, and I moved into this house and saw this, and now I've had a number of experiences since. It changes you. Some of these places can change you physically, mentally, and now spiritually. You will be seeing these things. Yeah, but is it like an infection now? You have a parasitic entity attached to you. And it's going to, and if it's, and I don't think all of them feed off of fear. I think there's positive entities that that are symbiotic with us. We want to call them parasitic, but symbiotic, that live off of our good feelings too.
Yeah.
We don't understand the realms we cannot see. Our visual sight and feelings are only a small percentage of the reality around us. And that's what I have a theory that a lot of the answers lie in there, that we are dealing with life forms that live on a whole different level than us, that are symbiotic with us and parasitic with us. And I think there's a lot more we can learn and try to understand if we take it from that perspective.
What you were saying, though, about these things being able to breed within your energy field, are you? This is the question for that. Is that breeding with us, or are they breeding with one another and using us as energy just to procreate?
It's like Alien. I'm a big fan of the Alien movie. They're laying their egg in you, but they're not breeding with you. You're the host. You're just the host for the egg. That's what Sharon Palmer said. I don't know. I found that really interesting. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but it would make, I found it really interesting when he said a lot of when you have the crazy psychokinetic activity, this is during like this basically hatching of these creatures inside energy fields, and they need people for it. And I like, that is really creepy and gives me the creeps, think that things are laying eggs in your energy field. And, and he's like, this is where possession comes from. And this is why he has a whole book called Science of Spiritual Possession. It's really interesting, but it reads like a college book. It's huge and very science, he gets down to all science of it. And it's really interesting. But that I'm still fascinated with that idea, and I always feel, because of my shadow person experience, that there are things that are parasitic that we don't understand, that are around us, interacting with us in different ways, and symbiotic too, in a good way, maybe, that we don't see. I mean, if you think about like the psychokinetic energy that they blame on humans, like the Jackie Hernandez case and the entity case, and that they say it comes from the person, it's all from their psyche and it's manifesting from them. Well, I believe people can have incredible spiritual power to do things, and subconsciously at times, but if they don't have it until they move into a certain location, like the entity case or the Jackie Hernandez case, that means there's another element we're not factoring in. That's what Barry Taff got. It's the environment that triggers it in the person, but it's got to be something more, because there's intelligences that come from this. And like the Bell Witch, it would talk to people and all that, and people say, well, that's just coming from the psyche of the little girl. It's all psychokinetic. I don't think so. I think these things people communicate with, and at times are parasitic, and not just fear they feed off. It might be like the quantum effect. They need our attention and awareness to exist they get more power out of our awareness and of their existence. Like the tree, does a tree make a sound in the forest when it falls, kind of thing, if nobody's there to witness it?
The tulpa thing.
Yeah, our consciousness gives it the energy to manifest in this world, which it so much wants to do. It's more food for it. I don't know, but these are all ideas I've been playing with for years in my head, wondering, how it's all connected.
And that's, wow. Okay, because like one of the things I was going to talk about real briefly, I'm going to tell you the tulpa thing. Like you're describing, like a tulpa absolutely needs the human host to survive. Because without that, its world is gone. It's like a dream entity that it's gone.
It's a thought form.
It's a thought form.
You can create it.
And there was a Muslim cleric, and he was real big into the hadith. You know what that is?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's a book. It's very esoteric. There's a lot of esotericism in some of these different.
Yeah.
And Muslims, just like Christians, shun a lot of that. But this guy, he was real big into that, and I think he was into at one point he practiced Sufism, like a Sufi.
Sufism.
Sufism. And he became a Muslim, and he was very into his faith, but he said at one time he was studying, and he said that he had, this is what I read in a book. I can't even tell you which book it was because I've read so many stories, and I had I was talking to Weatherly about this on my show one time, like how many Fate magazines we'd read, because I had the subscription to Fate magazine for 20, 30 years, And so you read all these stories, and so this was one that I had read, and this guy, he said that he had communication with a jinn, and it was a very long-term relationship, friendship, whatever, and it was an elder one, and he said that this thing gave him a lot of information. One of the things that he was told, by this one particular entity who he claims never did anything negative to him, I don't know, that's neither here nor there, but he said that it warned him of what he called an archon. Now, what this entity described as an archon was our own thought forms. And what the entity told him was what we think of as demons, fairies, jinn, all that, whatever, that they have, now they have laws and rules they have to follow that are laid down by God, and by the heavenly host, the Elohim, or whatever you want to call it. And that they are supposed, now of course that means there's outlaws, just like we're not supposed to go rob banks, we're not supposed to go and shoot up a beer joint or whatever, but it happens, because there's outlaws, there's people that are like, I don't care about the law, and that's a small percentage of the population, but they still do it. I mean, it's smaller than the ones that actually abide by the law, but but he said that this entity told him that these what it was calling archon was like a thought form, that a human, when a human creates a thought form and it goes off on its own and becomes its own entity, that it looks for nourishment and it does parasitize anything it can find. And that there is no controlling it. There is no law for it because man created it. So only man can take it out and destroy it, and it's something that can wreak havoc on, I guess, quote unquote, the spiritual ecosystem, because
it's a curse.
Yeah,
a curse is a tulpa. It's a thought form that has a mission, and the Bell Witch, if it's succeeded in its mission, it doesn't go away. It's still there, but now the Bell family, generations have gone since John Bell died. Mm-hmm. What does it do? It's wild now. And
it's just running around doing what it does. Yeah. And that's what these thought forms do. So you got to be very careful in the energy that you put into something like this, because you can create something that goes off on its own, and it doesn't live by any law. It doesn't follow any rules. It's just there, and it is not a demon. It's not an angel. It's not anything. It's just what mankind has thought up with the power, because I believe, and the way I believe is that we are all a little bit of the spark and life and breath of God. He put that in us, and that's kind of like, that's what makes us go. And it's that little bit of electricity, energy that God breathed into us. I don't necessarily mean literally, but that's how we are formed, and so because of that, we do have a little bit of the power of creation. So what this entity was warning was that those entities, when they're created by mankind, they're just loose. They're just wild. They don't have any kind of rules. They don't follow any kind of anything, and they're the most dangerous. And those are the ones that would absolutely be the most destructive, because, like he said, and they just gain power to stay in existence, to stay conscious. Because it's become conscious, almost like an IA, I
think that's a lot of people. Reason people, I do have to get going. It's getting late, but I think that's why a lot of people run into problems with Ouija boards.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a gateway.
They might be creating, not just gateway, but they might be creating a thought form through their expectation.
Well, the experiment, I don't know if you know about that,
Yeah.
the college experiment where they created the entity. Yes. And then of course it started doing things and making, there's been a lot of cases of that. And I know you got to go, Jason, but it's very interesting though, our conversation that we had. Folks, I want to wrap it up. But me and Jason, we could talk all night about all this. This is crazy stuff. But we got pretty cerebral into, but and it makes
paranormal soup.
It is, and it makes you think, and one final thought, I want to ask you one question before you go. Bigfoot, Dogman, flesh and blood, if you lean one way or the other, what do you think? Spirit?
I don't lean any way on it because I've not experienced it, and I think all things are possible. I believe the people when they had the paranormal like encounters with Bigfoot and Dogman. With Dogman, I definitely feel like it's something more paranormal than Bigfoot. I can buy that Bigfoot might be a physical creature that exists. It's not paranormal. Maybe there's paranormal things related. Maybe it has access to things. I don't know. But Dogman, for me, more I would lean towards like a non-physical creature because of the ancient traditions of of Anubis and all of the cultures I described, like dog-like beings. Yeah, and portals to another place. It sounds interdimensional. That's what it is. Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, I'm open. For the debate, I'm open for the ideas people have on it.
Yeah, and Jason, I want you to come back at some point and sit in on a couple of like when I bring on people who are guests that tell their stories, and then maybe me and you could dissect it together, and kind of talk to them and see, come to some sort of conclusion. Yeah, because I got lots of guests that come on, and I have a lot of people that can tell Bigfoot and Dogman stories all day long, and alien abduction stories, and we can interview them together.
Yeah, I'd love that. And that's what I love about your show is I have a lot of guests that a lot of people have read books or know of, not always. But plug here, paranormalsoup@jbland@gmail.com. If you want to email your stories, I'm jealous of the stories you get. People do email me, send me messages, but most of the time I just get them calling into my show and telling me the story, which I love that just as much. But I love how you get people to open up to you and tell you of their experiences. Because like I said, I feel they're all pieces of the puzzle. And that's why I have phone lines on my show and I do a live show. I want people to tell me, call in. Every Sunday night, guys, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, live on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch and Paranormal Radio app.
And it's a pretty good time, guys. Let me tell you, I enjoy Jason's work. I think Jason is smart. Like I said, he's sharp as a tack, smart as a whip, and he is very quick, witted. And if you are not doing anything on a Sunday, Jason, go check him out. I do. And I've called into your show, and we've talked on there, but I can tell you this, it's not a waste of time. So, check him out, and Jason, you'll be back on my show. I guarantee it. And you got we left a lot of meat on the bone, but we talked about a lot of things. Thank you for coming on and talking about these things, because it's not always a comfortable thing to do. And it does take some energy and some effort to sit there and go over these things, because they are pretty rough. Some of it's pretty rough,
We're never going to figure any of this out if we don't talk about our experiences.
Absolutely.
If we keep them deep down and don't feel like we have open forum, the place to talk about it, which I think both of our shows are great about providing that open forum, we're never going to figure these things out.
Yeah. Every time I drop a show, too, I get 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, who knows how many stories from that episode. Just the longer I go, then somebody will say, hey, and then I'll have enough to do a whole nother series. But so what I was thinking is, I can, we can talk about some of these stories I got, and we can dissect them together. And I think that Jason,
especially if you get a green floating head story, somebody comes to you, I want to know right away.
Haven't gotten that. That's a very unique. I had the red one, but and I don't know why it was red, but I haven't gotten any green ones. But that's crazy.
You get one like that, I want to know.
Yeah, I think it's the only one I got actually of a floating head, kind of. But all right, Jason, I'm gonna let you go, dude. I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking, and I had a good time, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Okay, all right.